All right, our next speaker is coming to us from a partnership between the Society of Professional Journalists and the Google News Lab. And I was just chatting with him backstage. This year alone, on one airline, he's done 175,000 miles in the air as he's been traveling all across the country, helping journalists learn how to use Google's tools to improve their storytelling. This is a wonderful partnership between SPJ and the Google News Lab. This is Sam's second time here to Athens this year. And he was just telling me that a couple of weeks ago at the Online News Association's event up in Washington, D.C., they had 42 Sams wandering around helping people get better with Google tools. So I'm not going to say much more. Let's welcome Sam Stewart from the Society of Professional Journalists and the Google News Lab.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. How are we all feeling? We're almost there, right? There's only a couple more sessions left for those of you who've been here 2 days. Hopefully your brains aren't completely full, because I have a little bit more information to tell you. So as Mark mentioned, I'm here with a partnership between the Society of Professional Journalists and the Google News Lab. I'd love to ask, how many people know what the Google News Lab is? Show my hands. Just a handful of people? Okay, well, good. Well, so for those of you who don't know, the Google News Lab is a part of Google that actually aims towards journalists in media. And what they do is they take a tool set of Google products and they help the people in journalism and media practitioners utilize those products for storytelling. And so that's everything from training to actually working with newsrooms one-on-one for custom projects, and doing what I do, which is basically going into newsrooms and staying with them either a day or a couple of days to help them absorb how to use these tools for storytelling. And so the nice part about that is immersive storytelling is one of the 4 focus areas in 2017, which encompasses things like drones. Drones and I'll say 360 video. We're going to mainly talk about drones today, obviously, from the content areas that we're talking about. But we will probably dabble just quickly into 360 video. And so again, this training network, there's about 15 of us across the United States that are available to provide no-cost trainings to newsrooms and universities. And so I'm going to give you a little more information about that at the end of this deck. But if the things that I talk about today in the short time we have seem to generate some interest, and maybe you have people in your newsroom or people at your university who want to learn more about these, I'm going to leave you with information about how you can request a training similar to what we're going to do today. So again, the News Lab is in that intersection of people who are publishing stories and the Google products or the Google tools. So we're all here today. I think we all realize that there's a lot of changes going on with technology, right? The way people find news and consume news and share news is different today than ever was, right? I mean, we're sitting here now, hundreds of us at a drone conference, right? Talking about how, we're flying robots around now and taking visuals. Something that's much different than how we consume news, let's say, 5 to 10 to 15 years ago. The other nice thing about that is I come from a visual news background, and a lot of the tools I'm going to talk about today are visual-based, right? I think we all know in this era of the attention economy and of social media, things that have a huge visual component generally resonate much better, right? So the nice part about the tools I'm going to talk about today is they have that rich visual component to them, which I think partners very well with the stuff you guys are going to get out of drones. And then again, there's these new opportunities today. We'll talk about it, like I said, a little bit briefly, but VR, AR, 360 video give this amazing context to news stories, right? They actually allow your viewer to almost transport themselves to that location and see what the reporter or the photographer saw there. And it really, when you watch things like this in an immersive headset, it really brings you into that story. And so we'll talk a little bit about how some people are taking some of that 360 video and attaching it to things like drones to actually bring that element of getting to a location that was hard to get to before and bringing that immersive experience to it. So one thing I want to mention, and some of you who were here last night heard Al Tompkins talk about it, but one of the things we did this year is we held some drone journalism schools. One of them was actually here in Athens, Georgia earlier this year, where we brought in journalists who wanted to take their Part 107 tests. We trained them on everything from METAR to looking at sectional maps to realizing load balancing, and we actually partnered with DJI, where DJI came in and actually brought everything from a Spark to an Inspire and showed people, many of them who hadn't ever flown before, showed them what it was like to learn the skills on how to pass the Part 107, how to actually take control of a drone, fly it around, get an understanding of how the different crafts respond and actually can be used in a storytelling setting. And then many of them, because we have a closed group where we kind of track the progress of who actually went and took the test and who passed the test, and a great percentage of them actually went on, took the Part 107, and are out there flying legally and safely and responsibly, just like many of you out here. And so what I'm going to talk about are some tools that we learned resonate really well with not only this cohort, but other newsrooms that I've been in, that actually help pair with the stuff you guys are going to be getting out of your drones, right? So you're going to be going out there and getting great visuals, getting videos and stills and sometimes some data. I'm going to talk to you today about tools that will help enhance that storytelling. So these are things you can do when you're publishing out the content, but also a lot of these tools will help you when you actually start preparing to go out to that story or that project, right? So you can actually get an idea of what that location might look like before you even go. Okay, and so with that, I want to show you a video. So many of you probably saw this video. This video was something that was taken, I think, back in, it was either late 2013 or early 2014, and this is from when the typhoon hit Tacloban in the Philippines. And many people know this story because one of the big, I think it was CNN, one of the big broadcasters actually showed a lot of this video in their reporting. And so one thing about this video, remember, it's from a couple years ago, right? So the quality's not quite as great as we have today, and maybe some of the flying isn't as smooth and adept as we are used to from videos shot today. But one of the things that really struck me about this was the access, right? We're doing something in this, using this technology that was almost impossible to do on the ground. Look at the floor, right? You're not going to be able to walk through this as well as this drone is flying through this building. The next thing you'll see when this drone actually gets the exit of the building, or what is the new exit of the building, is it'll actually move up and give you a better idea of what the surrounding environment looks like, right? And again, 2013, I remember seeing this video for the first time and realizing this is opening up these brand new opportunities for us, right? As this thing pans up here, I am left with a couple of questions, right? One of the major ones was, where is that building, right? What was that building? Where is this location? How far is it from the beachhead? How far in? Were things damaged? What's going on in this? And so the interesting part about this video is that it gives you some context, but I think there's a lot more geographical context that would help the viewer actually understand more about what we're seeing. And so the nice part about what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some tools that help do that, okay? And every single tool I'm going to talk about today is absolutely free. There's no cost to any tool we're going to talk about today, which I think is nice because we all know that drones and the associated technologies around drones aren't usually free, right? And so everything today we're going to talk about is going to be free and easy to use. Here's that location. And so using a software called Google Earth, or Google Earth Pro, many of you might be familiar with this, I'm able to actually figure out where this video is taken. And not only that, I can get this high-end view, but I can zoom down using the satellite imagery that's available for free in Google Earth Pro and see what that location looked like before this tragedy hit the Philippines, right? That's that building before it hit. This is the building when it hit. And this is the building fairly recently, right? And just having access and the availability to look at satellite imagery and pair it with drone video gives you that amazing perspective of what did it look like before? What did it look like during? And what did it look like after? And so later on in the slide deck, we're going to actually look at some more examples where they do this. But I think this is a very powerful way to actually really engage your audience and have them feel the emotion behind, unfortunately, disasters like this. Again, you can actually, in this software, look at not just that zoomed-in view. You can pan out and try to match up some of the perspectives that were done in the video. Again, allowing people to really immerse themselves in what that location and that context looked like. So this is what we're going to talk about today in the short time we have. I'm going to talk about Google Maps, which many of you are probably familiar with. I'm going to talk about a component of that called Google My Maps. We're then going to talk about Google Earth Pro. We're going to end up talking a little bit about YouTube 360, and then I'm going to leave everyone with resources, because today's time is short, so we're going to basically give you an idea of what can be done and what the tools are, and then I'm going to leave you with resources on how you can learn more about these tools online for free. Okay, so there is a ton of geo tools that Google has in the stable, right? So here's a smattering of them, but we're not going to have, again, time to talk about everything. So we're going to pick and choose the ones that I feel like resonate the best for what you're all going to be doing out there with your drones. And so let's talk about Google Maps. So humor me here. Who used Google Maps to get here today, right? Show of hands. A fair amount of you, right? Especially if you're not probably from Athens or Atlanta, you did. So I did, right? This shows me, this is what I did a couple days before I came out here to get an idea of where I was going, right? I think we're all kind of used to doing this. This is just general user behavior. Where am I going? What does it look like there? So the base thing I want everyone to understand about Google Maps is news happens somewhere, right? So I think providing that idea of context to where you're bringing your content in from is very helpful. So the one thing I want to make sure everyone realizes is that these normal Google Maps that you see are all embeddable, or you can get an archive link that you can put inside your story. If you're publishing it online, you can actually embed that map to pair with that drone video, showing people where this video is captured, where this location is, to give them that idea of perspective. Most of you probably know, if you click down here in that bottom corner, you're used to seeing the satellite view, right? So sometimes, depending on what you're showing, the satellite view might be something that's more important than just that normal street view. Another thing that I want to point out here is nowadays you can click on this button, maybe some of you know this, and get a 3D view, right? And so these 3D views allow you to actually see perspective about how tall buildings are, how short buildings are. You can use your keyboard keys to actually pan around buildings and get a really, really good understanding of what the lay of that land looks like in 3D. I've seen people use this to actually publish with their content, and I definitely know of people who use this before they go out to fly their drone somewhere to get an idea of what that location looks like with that 3D perspective, right? Seeing how tall buildings are, seeing what the location looks like from the air. And again, the one thing I want to point out is that using these share buttons here, you can actually get an archive link to the map and zoom level you're looking at that you can actually put inside your story or pair with the video that you're putting up in YouTube, or you can actually do things like embed, right? So if, for many of you who are doing web publishing of some sort, you can actually embed that map, that satellite view, or that normal kind of navigational view that you're used to with your story to help people give that context to that location. Okay, so this is very useful if you're taking drone video of a building or a known location or inside a park or something like that, where you want to be able to give people that idea of where it's happening. Another thing that I like to point out too, many of you are probably familiar with this, Street View is also embeddable. So you can embed a street view if it makes sense in your story to show people that kind of street level idea of what it looks like. One thing I'll also point out, many of you may or may not know this, that Street View now always includes historical sliders. So it'll default to what it looks like currently, but you have the availability to click on that slider and move back in time at that location to see what it looked like potentially as far back as 10 years ago. So obviously the amount of imagery depends on the location and how recently and how frequently it was actually captured by a Street View camera. But generally speaking, for every location, you're going to have some sort of history back there. And I think that also can be potentially very helpful in storytelling, embeddable and linkable, just like any other map. Okay, so whether you want to actually provide context using the normal maps, the 3D maps, or Street View maps, it's the base thing I want everyone to take from this is it's all free, all very, very simple to use. Again, I feel like providing that locality really helps, especially with things like drone videos where people sometimes want to know where it came from. Where was this taken in location to the world? Let's take a look at a video though. So this is a video from the CBC News about 6 weeks ago, I think 6 or 8 weeks ago. And they're basically showing in this video some damage to a fishery. So a weather event occurred, it broke up this fishery, and a bunch of Atlantic salmon were released into a Pacific environment, right? And so this was actually something pretty bad. So you can see what they did basically is they took some video, they shot and showed the damage, just basically giving you an idea of the depth of destruction. And they actually pan up a little bit and give you some of that, that nadir view. And then what they did, because it's obviously not only important, most people probably haven't been to this fishery, right? So they see the damage, they get an understanding of how bad the actual event was, but they don't know exactly where this fishery was, right? So what happened is the CBC actually published on their story not only the drone video, but an embeddable map that showed where this event occurred, okay? Again, free to use, easy to embed depending on your CMS, and this is something that everyone here can do, later today, let's say. But let's talk about, so that's something that's really good for known locations, right? If you're taking drone video of a building or a park or something that's known and that's findable in Google Maps, that's the base level of understanding what people understand with the geo tools, right? You can always link out a location to pair with your drone still or your drone video. But let's talk about another possibility. What if the location you're filming is more discrete than, let's say, the middle of a park, right? Because if you look up a park, it's going to actually give you a drop pin in the middle of that park. But let's say the park's really large and you want to actually denote a part of that park or a location that isn't known to Google, right? The middle of the ocean or the middle of a lake or something like that. Let's say that's where you're taking your drone video. This is the next step. So you have normal Google Maps down here. The next step up is something called Google My Maps. Show of hands again, how many people know of Google My Maps? Handful of people? Okay. So what Google My Maps allows you to do, it allows you to take the base Google map and annotate it with your own pins or your own polygons. So you can start making customized maps of locations. Just like this. So what you're looking at here is actually, it was a festival that was happening in a park. And obviously, let me go back here. Obviously, the park doesn't normally have all these dots and all these bisected locations in it. But what you can do in Google My Maps is you can actually draw your own polygons or drop your own pins that match whatever story you're trying to do. So in this example, they wanted to take that park that was in Google Maps and draw boxes around where the restrooms were, where the stages were going to be, where the food vendors are. And so that ability could potentially work very well when you're talking about drone stories that have multiple locations, right? So hopefully your gears are turning about, let's say we went to a drone shoot that had 3 or 4 different locations. This might be a powerful way to actually use a map setting to link out to where your drone video is and show your client or your audience where exactly those drone videos were captured. Okay, so let's look at some more examples. Here's that blow up of that park, just so you get an idea of the availability of pins you can drop and boxes you can draw. And here's another example. So the Washingtonian used a Google My Map back during the inauguration. And what they wanted to do, obviously, inside the Beltway publication, what they wanted to do was show their audience what roads were closed and what roads were going to be open during the inauguration. And so what they could easily do with a My Map is actually draw lines around, red for closed, green for open. And if you were going to attend the inauguration, you could figure out how to get there. And if you wanted to maybe avoid the crowds of the inauguration, you could realize where it was happening and what thoroughfares were still open. Another example here is a newsroom in Argentina that had a bunch of wildfires. And so what they could do, again, draw polygons around the affected areas of the wildfires and drop pins along places either firefighters were working or places where you could aid. And you can understand here, not only can you drop those pins and polygons, but you can actually annotate them. You can annotate them with text, with pictures, or with video. And so now hopefully you're thinking about, well, maybe I'm going to co-cover something, and it's very useful to actually highlight my videos, again, in a location context. So you can show your client or your audience, here are 5 different drone videos I shot within this location, and here's where they were taken. And so this is a way to present that information that's not just a YouTube link, right? It's a way to actually give more context to the location. We see this also happening here, where just recently, CAL FIRE actually used My Maps to delineate where the fires were in Northern California. So where things were burning, where things were contained, and you get an idea of how you can potentially use these, again, for that storytelling element. You can actually also click on any of these pins or any of these polygons, and you'll have an information drawer that works on mobile and on desktop, where you can then annotate with that text, with those links, with photos, or with video. And so let's think about another potentially drone example. So many of you know, if you're from, this made national news, but it was based in Northern California, where there was a dam that had a spillway that broke open in Oroville, California. And so this is something that kind of bubbled up to national attention probably a couple months ago. And so what happened is you saw a lot of drone footage, because this was something where it's actually the biggest dam in the United States, which I didn't actually know until this national story took hold. But there were actually cities that were down water, I guess, from the dam that actually had to get evacuated. And it was very dangerous for journalists to go up there and take, pictures or video from the ground, because no one knew if this thing was going to hold or if it was going to burst open and spill water everywhere. And so you saw a lot of people using helicopters, you saw some people using drones to help cover this story. But again, since the dam is so big, they were taking it from different vantage points. So in this case, here's just a quick video here of what it kind of looks like. Obviously, huge location. What you're going to see over here is the normal dam opening, and here's the spillway that opened up. So basically, there was a little bit of erosion that happened with that dam, and water started coming out of a location it shouldn't have been coming out from, right? And they weren't sure if it was going to hold, they weren't sure if it was going to break open and kind of flood downstream here and affect a lot of people. And all this was the spillway damage, right if there was a break. And Al would probably say it was pretty bad audio. Okay, so just to give you an idea, that was some video. But what you can do again, because many people were taking different video from different locations, is utilize mapping to actually show where those locations were, right? So that video we just watched was down here, but there was a video that was taken from another drone up here near the kind of the left side of the dam, and then there was another video that was taken over here. And so what you can start thinking about doing is actually, again, using these maps as a kind of a locator device of showing people where this video was taken, right? You can actually drop pins if the video was kind of static like that last one we saw, or you can start doing things like drawing lines that actually could show the trajectory of where the actual craft was in relation to that video you can then link. The nice part about this is you don't actually have to stick with one base map. There's many other base maps you can use, so depending on the story you're trying to tell, maybe you want to have a base map that looks more like a normal satellite image, maybe you want to make a base map that looks more like a road map image, but you have that availability with Google My Maps. So again, what I'm hoping to do today is to show you these tools that hopefully get your mind thinking about maybe the next project you're going to do, or the next story you're going to do, or the next video you're going to do for a client. And maybe, not in all the different projects, but maybe certain projects lend themselves to doing something like this, again, where the output can be something that has more of a geographical look and feel to it. I know during, there was an ag panel where people were talking a lot about marshlands, or they were talking a lot about, doing water, taking water samples. In those instances where you're actually capturing some of that drone footage, maybe something like this might make sense. Something, again, easy to do, simple to make, and at absolutely no cost. Okay, so let's talk about Google Earth Pro, and I really want to know this. How many people are familiar with Google Earth Pro? Please raise your hands. Okay, good. A good handful of you. That's great to hear. So Google Earth Pro, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically, I call it a quilting of satellite imagery. So there's satellites flying all around Earth taking pictures, and what Google Earth Pro does is it takes in all those disparate satellite images and weaves them together into a product that lets everyone in this room download this software and kind of fly to any location on Earth and see what it looks like there, both in 2D and 3D versions for most cities, right? So you can actually have a really good idea of what that looks like. And there's also a lot of great measurement tools and historical tools and things you can do within that software that I think can either help you, again, pre-plan your flights or potentially output some imagery to add to the drone visuals that you're gonna make. And so this is what it looks like. I wanna point out that Google Earth Pro is the software that I recommend for everyone in this room. There is an online Google Earth that actually works in Chrome that is more of a kind of a browsing software. Google Earth Pro, which is a downloadable software, is what I recommend for everyone in this room. And the reason it's downloadable is because it allows you to actually export things like video. And so it's pretty processor intensive, and this is why this is something very unlike Google products where you're gonna download this to your computer, okay? So make sure that's the distinction here when I talk about Google Earth Pro. You always wanna make sure that you're getting the version that you download to your computer. Again, it's gonna let you do things like export high-res JPEG imagery. It's gonna let you do video tours. Many of you probably have seen tours like this if you watch certain newscasts where you kind of fly in from space down to a location. It's gonna let you export those in high definition. And you can actually import things like photogrammetry or GIS information as well. So those advanced users, some of you who are doing a lot of work with ag or doing a lot of work in research might already know about this. If you do not, I'm gonna show you some benefits here, how this potentially could be very helpful for you. But how's it used? How are people actually using this? Here's an example that the Boston Globe did back during the Nepal earthquakes, and they actually had a little bit of a slider implementation, but you got to see what it looked like before the event and after the event. And so you can actually go into the tool, export out high-resolution imagery of a certain time before the event, zoom back to what it looked like during the event, and export those both in high resolution. Again, from your chair, from your office. You don't have to actually go to these locations to do this. And so that's very, very valuable in storytelling. Here's another example. So again, California just actually came out of a drought. It's been in a drought for several years. And so this is a story that I think the East Bay Times ran about how the drought continues to shrink. And at that time, the feds were thinking about ending the actual official drought. And so what you can do to visualize that story is 2 months after the drought was actually enacted, this is what it looked like. This is one of the main reservoirs of water in California, and this is what it looked like. So there's kind of an overview of it, but one thing you can do is you can zoom in. Okay, so this is, I think this is 2 months after they decided to call a drought. You can get an idea of what the beach looked like, right? What the sides of the lake or the reservoir looked like. Here again is the Shasta Dam, but you get an idea of what it looks like. The nice thing about that then is you realize that as time moved on, the reservoirs filled up, they decided that maybe we're not gonna be in an official drought anymore, and you get an idea of what it looks like. See the difference, obviously, right? And so you can see how this can be something very powerful, and then potentially, with drones, you could go up and take a picture of present day and get an idea of how that could be thrown into the mix here to show before the drought, coming out of the drought, and maybe what it looks like yesterday, right? But you get an idea of how these additional visuals might be paired with the information that you're gonna pull out of your drones to help tell that story. Again, historical imagery for every location on Earth is built into this tool. No cost to everyone in this room. This is something that used to have a cost several years ago, but they decided that it was best to put out there for free. Again, apart from those 2D views that we just saw, there are 3D views that look something like this, and these are actually produced by planes flying over the locations and taking the oblique and the nadir imagery and making 3D models of this. The nice part about all this is the 3D model views like this are also exportable in high resolution. And so we see lots of people who are helping tell stories by exporting out some of these views and annotating where things have occurred. Again, could be potentially very useful for the stories you guys might do with drones. Here's something that happened just last week, right? Many of you know about the wildfires that are happening in California. We saw lots and lots of people using Google Earth Pro to show the before and after. So what you're looking at here is a 3D image that came out of Google Earth Pro. So they actually looked to see what the neighborhood looked like before the fire, and then this was an aerial image taken, obviously post-fire, in the exact same location. And so you can actually start pairing that aerial imagery with what it looked like beforehand The nice part about Google Earth, because it is a 3D model, you can actually pinpoint to the same kind of look and feel of the location image that you already took, right? The one that you took in present day, and kind of line it up to do things like this. Another example that happened, right here, same thing. Exported from Google Earth Pro, aerial image that they took, basically present day, right? That they took, I think it was last week. The other thing you can do is things like this. Again, the historical imagery, I think, for people out in this audience is something very, very valuable. Because generally speaking, depending on the projects you're working on, you're going out in present day taking these images, but you don't usually have a repository of what it looked like 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago. This is available in this tool, right? So here's a look at the Las Vegas Strip in 2017. And we're gonna walk back here in time, 2008. Okay, so you get an idea again, 2017, 2008. Let's jump back even further, 2002, right? This is pretty drastic. You notice that hotels became parking lots, right? And so again, you can hope to understand how using this kind of information and pairing it with what you can take might be very, very useful. So let's keep going back though. Here's 2002. This is again that same exact location geocoded to 1965, right? It's pretty amazing. It's a pretty stark difference from what it looked like in 1965 to 2002. But I don't think it's quite as stark as what it looked like before 1965, right? So what did it look like in 1950? It looked a lot different than it looks today, right? That's the Las Vegas Strip in 1950, right? And the great part about this software is all these types of images are available for not only the Las Vegas Strip, but for your house, or this building, or this school, right? So you can fly to those locations, use a history slider, and figure out what that location looked like, right? And so I think for, again, these people in these industries that I heard about these last day and a half, people who work in ag, who are looking at how, things are changing, how nature is changing over time, I think these images paired with what you can capture today with your drone, whether it be video or stills, are very, very powerful. Okay, so let's keep going here. Just some more examples. Again, this software does 2D and 3D. So this is downtown Portland. This is the Pioneer Courthouse Square. This is what it looks like in the 2D satellite view. This is what the satellite takes. That's what it looks like. You can export this out at about 5,000 pixel resolution, right? So it's pretty high resolution stuff. But don't forget, you can also do the 3D of the same location, right? So you see the difference. You see how maybe the 3D might again be very, very powerful for pre-flight, right? You're gonna go to a location and you wanna get an idea of what's tall and what's short around where you're going. You wanna see what different perspectives are. So maybe you can kind of pre-plan out how you wanna fly your drone. Maybe you wanna come in from the east because there's a better vantage point. All that can be done in this software. The other cool thing that I want to mention to this audience is measurement tools. So not only can you export this 2D, 3D, there are certain tools that are built in that help you potentially in the work you're doing. And so this is a great example of how not only can you export that imagery, but you can use things like measurement tools. In this case here, I'm just flying to a high school in Portland and I'm actually measuring out the field, right? And it gives me a really great estimation from these satellite images of what that distance is. And I know people who use this kind of stuff to actually estimate crowds or figure out, if someone's done a crime spree, how far those locations were. But it can be very useful, again, in all the implementations that everyone out here in this crowd might potentially do. Here's just another example of how exporting that 3D imagery gets used in storytelling. So this was a 3D image of St. Peter's Square, basically exported out of Google Earth Pro, and then the Washington Post annotated things, right? They showed where things occur. Hopefully you can see the connection of where using something like this, an exported 3D image of a certain location, might benefit in how everyone in this room is outputting their drone stuff, right? Whether it be visuals or stills or video, how something like this, exported out and annotated, might help your viewer or your audience absorb more information about the stills that you're gonna get out of it. Again, high res, people have done things like this. This is actually running a little fast on this slide, but it's the building of the Americana Stadium for the Olympics. And it's just basically exported stills put together over time to show how that's done. Most people have, in whatever town you live in, you have a building that's either come down or gone up recently, where potentially this could be a story. Again, something you can do and potentially add a new present-day still with your drone, right? So you take all these out of Google Earth Pro, take one from today, add that as the last slide. But again, not only stills, you can export HD video out of this. And so many of you have probably seen these kind of images where really, really helpful when some news breaks and there's not a still or video of that location, where you can actually fly to the location, export the video out, and pair it with either drone video or drone stills. Let's take a quick look at how some of these people have done this. So many of you probably heard another national story that happened in Oakland, California, where a warehouse caught on fire. It was kind of an art colony. There was unfortunately lots of people who were trapped inside it, and unfortunately lots of people lost their lives. There was a huge need to actually show the location, but obviously the news outlets there weren't allowed to fly right when it happened, right? Because they were firefighting for a little bit of time, and then they were doing a lot of recovery. This story, though, what the East Bay Tribune, which is one of the, the East Bay Times, which is one of the newsrooms that covered this story and actually ended up winning a Pulitzer for this story, did things like this, where they actually were using Google Earth Pro to show an aerial swoop of what the location looked like, right? Again, hopefully this helps connect those dots on how this is something very similar to what drones can do. And so sometimes, again, for pre-planning this can be helpful, or you can export this and you can see where you could do kind of a dissolve into an actual pan of this from an actual aerial that you take on your own, or it could just be how you want to cover the story. You know, where are the access points? We know that these streets may have been closed off. Is there another location where we might be able to get a better vantage point? But that gives an idea of how people are kind of exporting video with Google Earth Pro. But let's take another look.
Tonight at the nation's tallest dam,
video.
all eyes are on this emergency spillway.
Again.
Helicopters ready to drop bags of boulders, racing to shore up an eroding gash. The cascade holding for now, but still in danger of a major failure.
This is still a dynamic situation. It's still a situation we're trying to assess.
The order to evacuate everyone downstream came late Sunday, emphasizing this is not a drill.
You go straight through here and make a right wherever you can.
188,000 people warned of catastrophic danger, all racing to reach higher ground.
It was pretty hectic. The whole apartment complex started packing up and rushing out.
In 2005, environmental advocates warned of an infrastructure failure like this, but no action was taken. After weeks of relentless rain, Oroville surpassed capacity. If drained, water could cover an area the size of Connecticut a foot deep. The 770-foot dam is structurally sound. The main spillway, damaged last week, is releasing water quickly, but it's the emergency spillway made of earth that officials say could release a 30-foot wall of water, a virtual tsunami that could cascade into communities below.
I'm worried, of course, about people first and animals and then my home.
Overnight, the work continued to shore up the lake before the next rain. Oroville has had a dramatic turnaround. We were here 2 years ago when the reservoir was depleted.
Water levels are at historic lows, and they're dropping every day.
But now a deluge bursting at the seams, a region on the edge of disaster.
About a mile away from that jeopardized spillway on a shoreline that is safe for us to stand on, we want to show you the rapids here. They are strong enough to carry a home, even a neighborhood down the river. And with more rain in the forecast, this waterway will get even more dangerous. Lester.
News fans,
Okay, so you get an idea there of how basically Google Earth was used not only to kind of zoom into the location and give people an idea of context, but then actually was also used to do that animation, zooming you into the actual dam and showing you what it looked like. Again, pairing that with drone video. What's going on here? Okay, so here's another one I want to show. This one actually doesn't have any sound, but this is the Washington Post, how they actually use something very similar. They use Google Earth Pro to kind of do a zoom in to a beachhead, and then they dissolved into actual drone video, showing people kind of the last mile, if you will, right? So here you go, all Google Earth, shows people location, then they kind of zoom in to where that drone video starts, right? And we're seeing a lot of people doing similar things, where they're actually using Google Earth to give locality, and then merging it in with actual drone video. Here's something again from last week. This is fire damage from LA Times. There's your Google Earth zoom in, giving you an idea of placement, right? Where in the location did that event occur? And then you're going to see later on in this video where they used another use case of Google Earth to show before and after. I think it's a really strong case where, there's something humanizing about drone video, right? It's shown at a level that really helps us understand. It's something more intimate than helicopter video, right? Because you're closer to the scene. But I think at times there's a benefit from actually showing people kind of that quick locality of what we're looking at. I'm going to zoom you in to the scene you're at. We're going to cut to drone video, or we're going to do things like, here's what it looked like before, here's what it looked like after. And that's what we're going to see in a second here. As part of this video, they did some Google Earth stills where they showed certain neighborhoods, what they looked like before, and unfortunately what they look like now. There you go. That's Google Earth. That's what the location looked like before. And so again, from the satellite imagery, all these locations are there inside the software. So the location that you're doing your work right now with your drone, likely in that tool, ready to export many, many years of historical satellite view. So again, I hope that this kind of gets gears going about how these free tools can help potentially enhance the work you're doing with your drone, depending on no matter what industry you're working in. One thing I wanted to point out too, that especially for those of you who are in kind of breaking news situations, a lot of this aerial imagery, this satellite imagery, when it gets captured, it gets put out for free on a mailing list. And so you can do the same thing with the tool, but if you don't have time to export things from the tool, you can just sign up to this mailing list. And when, I know that they put out some satellite imagery of the fire damage last week in a couple different bands too. It wasn't just visuals. They actually had some other satellite bands that they put out. But by going to g.co/Google Media Alerts, you can actually be alerted when newsworthy satellite imagery gets updated into the tool. And everything that comes out of there is free to use, so you're free to use it however you may see fit. But I know that people who are in academia, or definitely people who are in newsrooms, might have interest in the visuals that come out surrounding news, surrounding breaking news, right? That's where you're gonna find that. Another thing I always get asked about, especially when I talk about drones and video, is permissions. And so all the things that come out of Google Earth Pro, again, free to use. For people who are doing broadcasts, so television broadcast, there's basically just a quick form that you have to fill out. They track licensing, there's no cost, but there's a form that you fill out. All of that can be found at googleearth.com/permissions. It'll also tell you how to credit things if you're doing web or doing print. It's basically the short version is you always credit the tool. But for more information about that, please visit google.com/permissions. And then I also mentioned that there is a mobile version. So Google Earth also has a mobile version. It has no real export functionality besides screen grabs. So I think it's something that I've been told people use when they go out to location. They just have it on their phone, like a lot of the other apps you might have when you fly drones. And just having that Google Earth on your phone, you can kind of pan around and see what other things are going on in the location that you're flying at. So again, completely free, no real export, but sometimes it's useful if you're tending to fly in locations you're not familiar with. Okay, so the little time we have left, I'm gonna talk briefly about YouTube 360. So for many of you out there, I think, obviously we just talked a bunch of geo tools. I want to give you a little bit of insight about where I think kind of the bleeding edge of this is going. Many of you probably are very familiar with YouTube. Many of you probably upload your videos to YouTube. But what I want to talk about here is YouTube 360, and this is basically a component of hosting immersive content on YouTube. And so, as many of you know, I like to say the YouTube of VR is YouTube. There are there's tens of millions of VR videos that are 360 videos that are on there now. There's actually things like VR channels that have right now that says 2.2 million subscribers, and a screen grab I took probably a month ago, and so only growing. There is such an amazing amount of 360 content that's on YouTube right now, and I think the really cool part of this is there's some people who are actually taking some of these smaller, lighter, kind of prosumer cameras out and affixing them to drones. And so again, what you're doing is you're taking these cameras that are capturing, they usually have, the lightest ones usually have two lenses, right? They're either one camera that has two lenses, or sometimes they're two smaller cameras that can be mounted to a drone. They don't weigh that much. They obviously reduce their payload, so they're gonna reduce your flight time. But people are now having the ability of affixing these cameras to their drones and then flying their drones into locations that are interesting and capturing the entire environment. And so people who are watching these videos, whether it be on their mobile phones or their desktop computers, or sometimes in headsets like the Oculus or the Vive or even Google Cardboard, get to have this amazing experience of what it's like to be in flight and able to look in any single direction, right? And so I think this is something that's gonna be very, very interesting. And so here's just a shot of an early rig of someone who is actually in the audience. Ben Kramer up here in the front. This is a rig that he built a couple years back with the Phantom 2? Phantom 2 and two Kodak SP360 cameras. So these are two Kodak cameras that together will seam and make one immersive image. But he has kind of pioneered making kind of low-cost rigs that hook to drones and allow you to kind of capture these images that make it pretty accessible to most everybody, right? And so I'm gonna show one quick way. Okay, so this is how you kind of can consume these videos, right? Most of you know this, but for those who don't, you can actually use your finger to kind of pan through, and again, you can look everywhere. Up, down, left, right, everything is captured. Or you can actually use what they call the magic window on your phone and actually move your phone around to see the scene. Or you can use something like Google Cardboard and actually have it a split view. You would then put it into a viewer like this, and you can actually head track as you move your head around, see what the view looks like. And so I'm just gonna show you a brief video here of 360 video that was captured from a drone that gives you an idea of the possibilities of what some people are doing now with this technology. And so this is a 360 video that actually was shot at the Salton Sea. And so I will say, Mr. Ben Kramer again shot this video, and it won a huge award at the Online News Association about 10 days ago. It was in partnership
35 miles long and 15 miles
with the
wide,
Desert Sun.
making it the largest.
You'll see here they have some Google Earth imagery, as well as 360 video. Again, flying on a drone, so you can look all around. You get an idea of what it looks like to be in that world. And again, I think using things like cheap headsets really give you that amazing immersive experience where as you move your head, the view changes with you, and you get a really good understanding of the context of these stories.
Decades ago, in its heyday, the Salton Sea was a popular destination for tourists. But now, many of the fish and wildlife are struggling to survive. As the sea evaporates, lake bed is exposed, causing toxic dust to affect the health of nearby communities. One of which is the Torres Martinez Desert Cahuilla tribe, who have lived in this part of the desert for centuries. All of these communities are impacted by the local agriculture industry, which provides the Salton Sea with water that has kept it afloat. But in the coming years, less runoff will reach the sea. If measures are not taken to address the rapidly
so we can
shrinking
move
Salton
forward
Sea
here.
health disaster.
Okay, perfect. So, so for those of you who are interested in kind of what I think is like a really immersive way to kind of tell some of these stories, these low-cost cameras that people are affixing to drones, one way to learn more information about this is something called Journalism 360. And what this is, it's kind of a cohort of people who are working in this industry who publish out what they're doing, kind of best practices, good use cases. Again, it's to be found on Medium, so medium.com/journalism360. And they go cover things like which 360 camera should I choose for which budget? Or how do headsets work? And which headsets should I lean towards? How many people are actually using headsets? And which headsets seem to be more penetrated? So topics like that are on Journalism 360. If this is something that maybe one day you want to do, you want to attach these 360 cameras to your drone and try to do immersive stories like that. So what I want to leave you guys with in the time left is just resources. Again, what I was hoping to do today was to kind of show you tools that you probably already use, like Google Maps, but realizing features like embedding some of those maps or getting links out to the exact map and zoom views you're looking at could be very useful with your drone work. Letting you know that My Maps is out there to help you kind of customize maps if you have a story that makes sense to present in a geographical way. Google Earth Pro, I think, honestly, for people who fly drones, I think it's a must download. I mean, have it there, be able to kind of pre-flight what it looks like in that location, and then for a lot of stories involving drones, I feel like historical imagery can be very, very helpful. Okay, so this is what we covered. Maps, My Maps, Earth Pro, YouTube 360, and here we are at resources. One link to remember from this talk is g.co/newslab. So this is the Google News Lab main site. Every single tool I talked about today has copious amounts of online resources. Sometimes they're PDF downloads, sometimes they're YouTube videos, sometimes they're actual slide walkthroughs of how to use these tools. Obviously, in the time we had today, we couldn't go into depth about how to use these tools, but this is an amazing resource on how you can potentially use these things after our time together. There is a training center that actually will allow you to do things like take courses. So this would be a compilation of different tools put together in a course. Or you can actually learn specifically only about a certain tool. Let's say you really like Google Earth Pro and you want to learn how to make some of those zoom views, you want to export imagery, you can actually learn by just a single tool track as well. And the one last thing I want to talk about is obviously today we had about 50 minutes to talk about a bunch of tools. Nothing was in depth, but if these kinds of tools are interesting to you, this is the website to go to learn more about how these trainings can come again to your newsroom or to your media organization or to your university to help train people on how not only these tools, but there's about 15 more tools that we cover, everything from advanced search to doing verification, to doing data journalism, to doing things like fusion tables, as well as visual tools like this. This is the website you're going to want for that, spj.org/Google. So if you're interested at all, take a photo of this or just write it down. And with that, guys, happy flying, okay? If there's any other questions, I'm happy to talk after this, or if you want to kind of send me a note, this is a great way to get a hold of me. But good luck with the projects you do, and I'm looking forward to see what comes out of them. All right, everybody, thanks so much.
All right.